All right, so this video, I want to do a little bit of extra practice with circles. And remember that there's two skills. The first is recognizing the parts of it, and the second one is solving problems with area, circumference, and diameter, and radius. All right, and so let's go ahead and try to work on these. The first ones is you just have to figure out what are some valid radius or radii and diameters for each of these pictures. So like you see in the first one, they call FO the radius. They could have also done FR or FG. And the diameter, of course, is RG because it's going across the entire circle. So pause the video and try to do the same thing for the others. Identify at least one radii or radius, at least one radius and or all the radii that are possible, and then the diameters. And then pause the video and I'll review the answers here in a second. Okay, so here's the answer key for that. So you can see all the different radii and diameter there is. So on this circle, you can use RB, RI, or RD. By the way, it doesn't really matter if you flip those letters. If you put BR or IR and DR, they work as well. Each time they started from the radius when they're naming the segments, but it doesn't really matter if you name it with the letters backwards. And then the diameter would be DI. This one we have GO, GA, and GT with a diameter TO going across it. This one we have diameter MB and radius is LA, LM, and LB. CA, CT, and CS on this circle or SA for your diameter. SD, DO or DG for your radii on the last one, and then SG for your diameter. Okay. Now, remember that if you knew these diameters, like for example, if you knew that this one was 50, then you could also know how big the radius or radii were. So how big would be this radii if we knew the diameter was 50? Pause. All right, so these would be 25, because remember the radius is always going to be half of your diameter. What about if I knew that the radii was 10 on this other circle here? So then what would be the diameter? That will, of course, be 20. So they're just one double the other or one half the other, depending on which way you're going. So the diameter, let's say this is 5. So what would be the radii here? 2.5. Right? And that's kind of all she wrote, and so forth. Now, for the next objective, we are actually have to solve some problems using for area, diameter, and circumference. So each of these, they're giving us the radius or the diameter, and you have to try to figure out what the other ones are. Now, one thing that always helps you do these problems is even if they, because remember that the formulas that you're going to need for this, right, for area, you're going to use radius times pi. So you need radius for the area. And then for the circumference, you can use diameter times pi. So you need diameter for circumferences, right? So because of that, it makes sense that every time, even if you don't need it, I always start by drawing the radius if I don't have it, or drawing the diameter if I don't have it. So for a one like this, where the radius is 7, then I know the diameter is going to be 14. This one, where I have a diameter of 18, I know the radius is going to be 9. And here, the radius is going to be 4. Over here, the diameter is going to be 26, and so forth. Now, they kind of have you do that anyways, because you got to go through each one of them and add the radius and diameter. But the point is, on the test, even if you are not given the need to, doesn't ask you to figure out the radius, when you have the diameter, I would always take the time, just for kicks, to write down the one I don't get, right? So go through that first and add them all up, and then little by little practice that skill of doing that. So I'm going to do the first one for you before I reveal the answers for the other ones. And so make sure that you find out. And in the bottom here, it's the same thing. You just got to find out the area and circumference for all of them. All right, so let's see what we can do one of them. So again, we already figured out that the radius is 4, since the diameter is 8. So how do we figure out the area? Well, area is radius times pi. So this would be 4 times 4, which is 16. So this would be 16 pi. Now, in the test, if you are given options that have the pi in it, then that means you do not need to multiply that times 3.14 to figure out what it is. But if you do not, if the option choices do not have that, then you have to multiply it times the pi in order to get your answer. So it always depends on what the options are giving you. Just be careful. If there already is a pi in the answer choices, do not multiply it times 3.14. Remember, that's what pi is, 3.14. So now when you do that with the 16, you will get about 50 for the area of this. It will be 50 feet squared since the area is a two-dimensional thing. All right, and then what about the circumference? The circumference would be the diameter times the radius. And in that case, the diameter is 8. The diameter times pi. What am I talking about? I don't know why I wrote diameter times radius. Hopefully you caught that earlier in the video when I was doing it. So anyways, the diameter times the pi is the formula for circumference. And so diameter is 8. And so this is just going to be 8 pi. 8 pi. Now, again, if the option choices have that, then you just leave it like that. But if they don't, you have to multiply times pi, and you would get about 25 for your answer on that one. All right, let's practice one more, except this time I'm going to start with one that gives you the radius. So I knew the radius was 7, and therefore the diameter has to be double that, which is 14. So notice I always start, even if the problem doesn't ask me for it, if that was not the point, I always start by writing down the one I don't have. If they give me the radius, I write the diameter. If they give me the diameter, I write the radius. And then I try to figure out which formula I need to solve my problem. So for the area, I'm going to do radius times pi. So the radius is 7, so 7 times 7. So this will be 49 pi. Right, 49 pi. Now, again, if the option choices have pi in them, this is your answer. But if they don't, you have to multiply times pi, and we get about 154 for the answer on this one. Now, for the circumference, you would have to do the diameter times pi. So this will be 14 pi, since the diameter is 14. And again, if your answer choices have pi in them, that's it. You're done. That is your answer. If not, you have to multiply it times pi. So 14 times pi gives you about 48 for this one, or 47.6. So about 48 for the circumference, and so forth. So that's just basically how you do it. Now, before you try the rest of these, pause the video, work through them, and then I am going to review the answers and walk through it. So let's do it. All right, so hopefully you pause and try those yourself before doing this. Now, they do have almost all of the answers here in terms of pi. But if you needed to convert this to a number, all you have to do is multiply it times 3.14 to do that. But let's see if you did those right. So radius was 9 here, so the diameter is going to be 18. Area is 9 times 9 times pi, so 81 pi, and circumference is just 18 times pi. Area of this one is going to be radius squared, which is 13 times 13, so 169 pi. And then the circumference would be 13 times 13 times 2, which is the 26 times pi, so 26 pi. Here the diameter is 32, so the radius is 16, so the area is going to be 16 times 16, which is 256 pi. And then the circumference is just the diameter times pi, so 32 pi. This one has 5 as the radius, so the diameter is 10, which means 5 times 5 makes 25 pi for the area, and circumference will be just 10 pi, which is the diameter times pi. And this one, we have the radius is 15, since the diameter is going to be 30. So the circumference is just going to be 30 pi, and then the area is going to be 15 times 15, which is 225 pi. So this one has an area of 225 pi and a circumference of 30 pi. Circumference is pretty easy. Just get the diameter and slap a pi next to it. Now the radius is 8 here, so the diameter is 16, which means, again, circumference is just 16 pi. And then area is that radius times itself, so 8 times 8, which is 64 pi. So all you have to do is make sure that when you're doing this, that you use the right one for the right thing. Radius for the area, and then diameter for the circumference, and then you're good. This one will have an area of 100 since this diameter is 20, and so the circumference is going to be 20 pi, and the area is going to be 100 pi. So this is 100 pi for the area and 20 pi for the circumference. Now, there are some other kinds of problems that will sometimes show up, which are the ones that start with circumference. So you have a circle, right? And they will say the circumference around the circle, let's say to go around the track, it was 500 feet. And now you have to figure out what the area, say, is going to be. So how would you do that? Now, just remember this. Any problem that starts by giving you circumference, this is what you'll do. Remember that if you get a circumference and divide it by pi, you get the diameter. So if you're doing it that way, all you have to do, in this case, is get a circumference, which is 500. You get a different color here, just lighter so we can see. 500, and divide that by pi, and now we would have the diameter. And that may be the thing that you wanted on the problem, but this time you want area. So 500 divided by pi is about 159. So this is your diameter, though, not your radius. But in order to calculate area, we need radius. Right? So this is diameter again, remember. Now to get to radius, I just have to get that and divide by 2. So if I divide that by 2, I get about 79.6 as my radius. And now that I have the radius, I just have to get that number times itself again. And then I would have my answer, which would be for area, something like around 6,338 pi. Which, again, of course, you can multiply it times 3.16 if you need to. And in this case, it would be about around 20,000 or so. It's like 20,027, depending on how you rounded pi. But the point is, essentially, for an area, you just use the radius. For the circumference, you use the diameter. Circumference is given to you at the start. Divide by pi to get diameter, and then use that to find the radius if you need to, and use the radius to find the area if you need to. And do remember that if the answer choices have pi in them, you do not need to multiply times 3.16. But if they do, you just do that extra step to find out which answers match. And don't forget that the radius is half the diameter, and that every time before you start a problem, even if it doesn't ask you to, always figure out first what the diameter and what the radius is, and then just use the right formula for the right situation. All right. The biggest mistake people make is forgetting to use radius when you're doing area. They will sometimes slap the diameter in there and then get the answer wrong. And that's kind of why also not paying attention to the fact that the answers already have pi on them and you don't have to multiply times pi. And that's why it's not coming out. So if it has pi's on the answer choices, don't need to multiply by it. Just do it like I did in this worksheet. And that is a bit of extra practice for measuring circles. I hope you found this helpful. And almost forgot. If you do get a graph like this, right? And I'm going to sketch this out really quick here. Right? And then you have a circle that's drawn in that graph. Let's say something like that. That's actually a pretty good circle, but to do it by hand. How would you figure it out here what the diameter and stuff is? So we have 4 boxes to go across it. So the diameter here is going to be 4, right? And therefore, the radius is going to be 2, right? So that's kind of how you would do that. And so in this case, circumference would just be 4 pi. And then the area would be also 4 pi, since 2 times 2 is 4. And that's it, okay? All you have to do is, by the way, this is a special situation where the circumference and the area give you the same value, is when you have a circle with a radius of 2. It just comes out cool like that. But in general, to get the size of a circle that's drawn in a graph, just literally count how many boxes across the circle is, and that's going to be the diameter. And I think that's it. I think that That's helpful, and I hope that this will help you pass the PFA. And if you have any problems, come see me, guys, for help. And don't do anything that wouldn't make your mom proud. I'll see you in the next video.